In the heart of the wild, bonds are rarely forged across species. Yet, against all odds, two fragile bobcat kittens and a dying lion cub found an unlikely protector in a creature that was never meant to be their kind. What began as survival soon grew into something extraordinary, a family bound not by blood, but by instinct, devotion, and a love that defied nature itself. This story was made for you. Don't forget to subscribe for more. The morning mist still clung to the pine trees of the Colorado Rockies when two tiny bobcat kittens were carried into the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Center. They were only 5 weeks old, small, shivering bundles of fur, their ears tipped with soft tufts that had barely begun to grow. Their mother had been struck by a truck on a dark highway near Aspen, leaving the kittens helpless in a den discovered by hikers. Wildlife officers knew they had only hours to act. Without immediate care, the babies would not survive the night. Dr. Rachel Turner, the center's director, had seen her share of heartbreaking rescues in her 25-year career. At 58, with her auburn hair streaked with silver and her hands hardened from decades of fieldwork, she had long ago learned to temper hope with realism. The kittens were dehydrated, hypothermic, and weighed less than 2 pounds each. The male had a distinctive white patch on his chest, while his sister, more delicate, had striking amber eyes that seemed too large for her face. Rachel gently placed them in a warming incubator, but in her heart, she feared they might not make it. It was then she turned to Bella. Bella was no ordinary German shepherd. At 8 years old, she carried the proud bearing of a retired search and rescue dog. She had once worked the rugged terrains of Utah alongside her handler, Matt Lawson, tracking lost hikers and avalanche victims. But a permanent limp in her hind leg, the result of an injury during a rescue mission, had ended her career early. Knowing Bella still had so much love and drive to give, Matt entrusted her to Rachel at the Wildlife Center, confident the dog would find purpose there. Over the years, Bella had indeed become an invaluable member of the team. Her gentle temperament and keen maternal instincts had helped nurture orphan deer fawns, raccoon kits, and even a pair of owlets. But cats, especially the sanctuary's barn cats, were another story. Bella had always kept her distance, showing clear dislike whenever they wandered near. That's why Rachel hesitated. Could Bella, who had no patience for domestic cats, possibly accept wild bobcat kittens? Still, with no mother to guide them and survival hanging by a thread, Rachel decided to try. She brought Bella into the medical wing, where the kittens lay curled together in their warming box. The German shepherd, her ears perked and intelligent brown eyes alert, approached slowly. Rachel watched closely, ready to intervene at the first sign of aggression. But what happened next stunned her. Bella lowered herself carefully to the floor, stretching her body long and low so she wouldn't frighten the kittens. She let out a soft whine, a sound Rachel had heard Bella use only when comforting her own puppies years before. The kittens stirred, their tiny noses twitching as they picked up Bella's scent. Within minutes, Bella was licking them gently, cleaning their fragile bodies with the same deliberate care she once gave her own litter. From that moment, the transformation was remarkable. Bella refused to leave their side. She supervised every feeding, sometimes nudging Rachel's hand as if to correct the angle of the bottle. At night, she curled her body protectively around the warming box, sharing her heat and steady heartbeat with the orphans who had lost their mother too soon. Within 2 weeks, the kittens were thriving. Their coats grew thicker, their eyes brighter, and their energy boundless. They clambered over Bella's patient form, batting at her ears and pouncing clumsily on her tail. Bella tolerated it all with remarkable grace, occasionally giving a gentle paw to correct them when their claws dug too deep. The bond between them deepened daily, and the staff, though seasoned in wildlife rehabilitation, found themselves gathering to watch in quiet awe. Rachel documented everything meticulously, knowing this was no ordinary case. It wasn't just that the kittens had survived. It was how. They were learning behaviors, discipline, and a sense of safety from a dog, something no textbook could have predicted. The center's program had experimented before with domestic animals helping to rear wild orphans, but never with results this extraordinary. In the stillness of those mountain mornings, when the rising sun lit the pines in shades of gold, Bella could be seen leading the kittens on short supervised walks within the enclosed forest pen. Their tiny spotted bodies tumbled through the underbrush, learning to stalk and leap with the uncoordinated eagerness of youth, while Bella hovered like a guardian, her gaze constantly scanning the horizon. She was their protector, their teacher, their surrogate mother. Rachel often stood at a distance, notebook in hand, overwhelmed by the unlikely scene unfolding before her. She had spent her life studying the instincts of wild animals. Yet here was a German shepherd teaching orphan bobcats how to survive. It challenged everything she thought she knew about maternal bonds, about species, and about love. What none of them realized then was that this was only the beginning. Bella's instincts would soon be tested in ways no one at the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Center could have imagined. The arrival of another orphan, one far larger, more powerful, and infinitely more fragile, would change everything. The bond between Bella and her bobcat kittens had just begun to flourish when a phone call shattered the calm rhythm of the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Center. It was a late April afternoon, the kind when snow still clung stubbornly to the shaded slopes of the Rockies while the valleys hinted at spring. Dr. Rachel Turner recognized the number immediately. It was Robert Hayes, the director of the Canyon Springs Wildlife Sanctuary in southern Utah. His voice, tight with urgency, left no room for pleasantries. "Rachel," he said, "I need your help. It's a matter of life and death." Robert went on to explain the desperate situation. At his sanctuary lived a lioness named Nala, rescued from a notorious roadside zoo 2 years earlier. Nala had endured years of forced breeding and neglect, and though she had been healing slowly in the safety of Canyon Springs, her maternal instincts were broken. Against all odds, she had given birth to 3 cubs. But her trauma left her incapable of caring for them. 2 had already died. The third, a frail, 2-week-old female, was clinging to life by the thinnest of threads. Rachel's heart sank. She had treated malnourished wild cats before, but a lion cub rejected by its mother was a different challenge altogether. Still, she couldn't refuse. Hours later, as dusk settled over the pines, Robert's truck pulled into the reserve's medical wing. When Rachel first saw the cub, her breath caught. The tiny lioness was impossibly small, her ribs clearly visible beneath a tawny coat that looked more like down than fur. She weighed less than 3 pounds, half what a healthy cub her age should weigh. Her breathing was shallow, her movements weak. Robert's veterinarian had tried everything: special formula, warmth, hydration. Nothing worked. The cub refused to latch to a bottle, turning her head away with pitiful whimpers. Rachel prepared a heated bed and gently attempted to feed her again. The bobcat kittens watched from their box while Bella lay nearby, her keen eyes tracking every move. The cub's condition worsened with each passing hour. By midnight, Rachel feared she would not live to see morning. That was when Bella made her decision. The German shepherd stood and limped deliberately toward the medical table, leaving the bobcat kittens for the first time that night. She nudged Rachel's arm with her nose, then turned her attention to the failing cub. Rachel froze, realizing what Bella was asking. The dog still had milk. Her own puppies had been weaned only a month before, and she had continued to produce enough for the bobcats. But a lion cub? It was unthinkable. Dogs and lions were separated by millions of years of evolution. To place them together was not just unconventional, it was risky. Yet as Rachel looked at the cub's fading eyes, she knew the alternative was certain death. With trembling hands, she lowered the cub toward Bella. What happened next left everyone speechless. Bella immediately began to lick the cub, her large tongue sweeping gently across the fragile body with an urgency Rachel had never seen before. She shifted her posture, curling carefully around the newborn as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Instinctively, the cub latched onto Bella and began to nurse, weakly at first, then with growing strength. The sound of steady sucking filled the room, and for the first time since her arrival, the little lioness looked calm. Robert Hayes, a man hardened by decades of working with exotic animals, wiped tears from his eyes. Rachel stood in stunned silence, understanding she was witnessing something extraordinary, something science alone couldn't explain. At that moment, species and history didn't matter. Bella had recognized a baby in need, and her response was pure, unconditional motherhood. Over the next few days, Bella's life became a careful balance. She continued caring for the bobcat kittens with her usual patience, but now there was a new child to protect, a child far larger, with instincts that would one day outgrow even Bella's discipline. Rachel and her staff held their breath, monitoring every interaction. Yet Bella seemed to know instinctively how to adjust. She was gentler with the lion cub, nuzzling her when she struggled, while still enforcing fair discipline among the bobcats. The cub, soon named Grace by the staff, began to recover. Within a week, her ribs no longer jutted as sharply. Her eyes, once dull, brightened with life. The staff would often find her curled against Bella's side, nestled among the spotted bobcats, as if she had always belonged. Word of the unusual family spread quickly. Volunteers stopped by quietly, watching from a respectful distance as Bella nursed her mixed brood. Some whispered disbelief. Others simply smiled, knowing they were seeing something rare and profound. Cameras captured every milestone. The first time Grace batted playfully at her bobcat siblings. The first time Bella corrected her posture with a gentle paw. The first time the cub purred against her adoptive mother's chest. Rachel, ever the scientist, recorded everything with meticulous notes. But late at night, when she sat alone reviewing the footage, she admitted to herself what no chart could capture. This wasn't just animal behavior, it was love. A love strong enough to defy biology, circumstance, and even the harsh rules of survival. Bella had already saved the lives of 2 bobcats. Now, she has given a lion a second chance. What no one could have known then was how deeply this decision would ripple through the years to come, leading to a reunion so astonishing that even the most seasoned wildlife experts would struggle to believe it. By the time summer swept across the Colorado Rockies, Bella's unlikely family had grown stronger than anyone at the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Center could have imagined. The 2 bobcat kittens, now nearly 4 months old, bounded through the underbrush of the enclosed forest pen with growing confidence, their spotted coats sleek and their muscles lean. Their sibling, the lion cub Grace, lagged behind in size only briefly. At 3 months, she was already nearly as large as Bella herself, her paws oversized, her movements clumsy but full of determination. Staff and volunteers often gathered at a distance to watch Bella guide her mixed brood on supervised walks. It was a sight that seemed almost mythical. A German shepherd limping gently ahead, 2 bobcats crouching and leaping through the brush, and a young lioness stumbling after them, trying to imitate their stalking postures. Bella was patient with each of them, correcting mistakes with a nudge of her nose or a swat of her paw. Somehow, she seemed to understand the different needs of each species. The bobcats needed lessons in stealth and independence. Bella encouraged them to climb, to listen to the rustle of leaves, to freeze when danger might be near. Grace, on the other hand, required gentler guidance. Bella tolerated her clumsy swipes, her tendency to pounce too hard, her loud, unrefined attempts at mimicry. More than once, volunteers witnessed the extraordinary sight of Bella lowering herself into a playbow to coax the lion cub into controlled practice. Dr. Rachel Turner even captured a photo of Bella correcting Grace's stalking posture, a picture that later made its way into National Geographic, sparking fascination worldwide. Yet beneath the wonder of this unusual family lay a reality that no one could escape. The day would come when Bella would have to let them go. By late August, the bobcats had grown into strong, capable adolescents. Their instincts to hunt and roam were surfacing, and the small enclosures of the Wildlife Center could no longer contain their wild spirits. For their survival, they needed to begin the next phase of rehabilitation, living in a remote pre-release habitat deep within the reserve, where human contact would be limited, and their natural skills sharpened for eventual release back into the wild. Grace's situation was more complicated. Though thriving under Bella's care, she was a lioness, destined not for the forests of Colorado but for Canyon Springs Sanctuary in Nevada. There, she would be introduced to other lions, including a rescued lioness who had recently given birth to cubs near Grace's age. For Grace's safety and long-term well-being, she needed to bond with her own species. The decision to separate them tore at Rachel's heart. She had watched this family grow, witnessed Bella's extraordinary devotion, and marveled at the bonds that had defied biology. But as a wildlife professional, she knew what had to be done. With a heavy heart, she began the process of transition. The separation unfolded slowly over 2 weeks in September. First, the bobcats were moved to their new enclosure, where they quickly began adjusting to the wild. Cameras placed in the area captured them hunting insects, climbing trees, and learning to stalk small prey. They were thriving. Bella was brought to the enclosure's edge several times during the transition, as if to reassure her that her kittens were safe. Next came Grace. Transporting a lion cub was no simple task. On the morning of her departure, Rachel carried Grace to the waiting transport crate while Bella watched intently. The cub gave a soft whimper, reaching toward Bella with her paw. Bella pressed her nose to the bars of the crate, whining softly in return. For a long moment, the two locked eyes, mother and daughter in every way that mattered. Then the truck pulled away, carrying Grace toward her new life in Nevada. That night, Bella refused to eat. She lay curled in the corner of the medical wing, resting her head on the empty blanket where Grace and the Bobcats had once slept. She whimpered softly, searching the air for scents that were fading fast. Rachel sat beside her, stroking her graying muzzle, whispering reassurances that felt hollow in the silence. Over the weeks that followed, Bella's grief was palpable. She patrolled the forest paths where she had once walked with her mixed brood, nose to the ground, tail low, searching for traces of them. Volunteers described her as quieter, more withdrawn, though she still offered care to new orphaned animals brought into the center. She performed her duties with the same maternal grace, but the spark in her eyes had dimmed. Winter arrived early that year, the snow heavy and unrelenting. From the cameras deep in the reserve, updates showed the Bobcats thriving, sleek and independent, adapting beautifully to their wild environment. In Nevada, Robert Hayes sent word that Grace had adjusted to her new pride, bonding quickly with the other young lions. She was healthy, strong, and growing into a magnificent lioness. For Bella, the knowledge brought some comfort, but it didn't erase the ache of absence. The forest felt emptier, the nights longer. Still, she carried on, her spirit anchored by a resilience that came not from instinct alone, but from the unshakable love of a mother. What none of them realized was that this painful goodbye would not be the end. 2 years later, Bella's love would echo back to her in ways that stunned scientists and moved the world, a reminder that true bonds never fade, no matter how wide the distance or how deep the divide between species. 2 winters came and went in the Rockies, and Bella, though older and slower, remained the quiet guardian of the Rocky Mountain Wildlife Center. At 10 years old, her muzzle had grown gray, and her limp was more pronounced, yet her spirit remained steady. She had raised dozens of orphans since her Bobcats and Grace were taken to their new homes, fawns, raccoons, and even a clutch of owlets, but nothing ever quite filled the space left behind by her unusual family. Then, on a crisp March morning, almost exactly 2 years to the day after the Bobcats had first arrived, something extraordinary happened. Bella began barking from the edge of the reserve's perimeter fence. It wasn't her usual alert bark. This sound was high-pitched, almost jubilant, laced with an excitement that startled Dr. Rachel Turner out of her office. Rachel rushed outside and froze. Sitting calmly on the other side of the chain-link fence was a full-grown bobcat, lean and powerful, with a distinctive white patch on his chest. He was no random visitor. Rachel recognized him immediately as the male kitten Bella had once nursed back to health. Now a magnificent adult, nearly 30 pounds, he stared at Bella with steady golden eyes. What happened next left the staff speechless. The bobcat let out a soft chirp, a sound used by wild cats to communicate with their young. But this call was directed at Bella. The German shepherd's tail wagged furiously, her whole body quivering with recognition. She dropped into a playful bow, just as she had when he was a clumsy kitten. The bobcat responded by pressing against the fence where Bella's nose met his. For several minutes, they remained like that, wild predator and domestic dog, mother and son, until the bobcat slipped silently back into the forest. Before disappearing, he looked back once, as if to say a proper goodbye. Word of the encounter spread quickly. Wildlife officers confirmed through trail cameras that both bobcats were thriving in the reserve, occasionally appearing near the areas where Bella once walked them. But the story didn't end there. A week later, Rachel received a call from Robert Hayes in Nevada. His voice was thick with emotion. "Rachel, you need to come see this." Rachel and Bella made the drive to Canyon Springs Sanctuary, where Grace, now nearly 280 pounds of muscle and grace, lived with her pride. As they approached the enclosure, Grace spotted them from across the habitat. Instead of roaring, she raced toward the fence, her massive paws thudding against the ground. What followed wasn't aggression but a chorus of soft chuffs, the affectionate greeting lines reserved for family. Bella showed no fear. She pressed against the steel barrier, whining softly, her tail wagging uncontrollably. Grace lowered herself to the ground, stretching as close to Bella as the fence allowed. Then, in a gesture that stunned onlookers, she began to groom her paw, an action Bella had taught her as a cub. For over an hour, the lioness and the dog stayed together, separated by metal but united by memory. Volunteers wept openly, while biologists recorded every detail, struggling to understand how a bond could endure across species and years of separation. When it came time to leave, Grace followed along the fence line until the vehicle disappeared from sight. Bella, exhausted but happy, lay down in the truck with a quiet sigh, as if reassured that her daughter was safe. News of the reunion spread nationwide. Documentaries were made, articles published, and scientists debated the implications of such cross-species memory and attachment. But for Rachel, the explanation was simple. Bella had shown the world that love was not bound by genetics or biology. It was a force that reached across boundaries, enduring despite distance and difference. Bella lived 4 more years, continuing her work as the reserve's gentle caretaker. When she passed peacefully in her sleep at age 14, Rachel arranged for her ashes to be scattered partly in the forests where the bobcats roamed and partly in Grace's enclosure at Canyon Springs. That night, cameras in the reserve captured both bobcats sitting side by side near the old fence line, calling into the night. In Nevada, Grace paced and vocalized, restless and mournful, as though she somehow knew her mother was gone. A bronze statue was later placed at the Wildlife Center, depicting Bella with the 2 bobcats and Grace at her side. The inscription beneath read, "Love knows no boundaries, no species, no limits." Visitors often asked Rachel if the story was true, if a dog had really raised 2 bobcats and a lion, and if they had truly remembered her years later. Rachel would smile, point to the forest, and say, "If you're very lucky, you might still see a bobcat with a white chest patch sitting near her memorial, waiting, watching." And somewhere in Nevada, a lioness still chuffs softly at the sight of a German shepherd, remembering the one who gave her life.